And welcome to another Biddle on Saturday, September 19th, 2020. How's everybody doing?
Hello, hello.
Hey, bro.
Hello.
Hey.
Hey.
Ah.
So
We're all
Happy
here.
Saturday.
I think YouTube says that we are. I think YouTube says we are live.
I'm seeing
so
it. So I think we're good.
We'll just run with
We're
it.
live.
I don't know what happened to the hiccups we were having the other weeks, but we are officially open for business. And yeah, so what's going on? What's happening? I'm just going to throw it out there to everybody else and let them talk for a while.
Sounds like lots of distro happening this week.
Had a horrible week.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, it was filled with so much work that it was just bad.
That always makes it horrible.
Yeah.
On Thursday, I had a live production. Basically, took me half the day to do. Before that, 2 days to prepare. And at the end, everything was a slightly better than crap. And
That's such high praise.
Yes. Yeah.
thankfully, the recordings were okay. So now I just need to edit, and it will be a bit better than what it was.
Well, Rocco does that every week for us, or every other week.
Well, Big Pot, it's over, and you're here now, so let's not worry about that
Yeah.
bad week, all right?
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
phone's
Okay.
dinging.
All good.
Joe, you were excited to talk about something, so bring us all up here and tell us about what you were excited to talk about.
All right, well, just indulge me a little bit because I'll try not to be every detail because it'll drag on. But I actually am on a different distro after 21 months. And what drove me to do it was I saw some updates come through. At first, I thought it was App Image Launcher that maybe I took out a wrong file when I decided to take it out of the system. But coincidentally, there were 2 kernel updates and then 2 patches for Linux Mint Cinnamon. And right after the second kernel update and the patch is I wound up with a no boot. So I get Super Grub out and I'm able to boot with that. So I knew it did something to the grub. And I mean, I messed around for hours. Finally, I got fed up and I said, you know what? Nuke and pave. So I thought, well, I got 20 on the other machine. It's been okay. I'll put 20 on there. I put 20 on there. And next thing I know, my app launcher or the applets launcher is acting funny. You get the drop down thing
Joe.
with nothing in it.
Joe, you're not bringing me up here.
Not bringing you up.
You're supposed to give us good news.
Well,
Good
no,
vibes,
here's
man.
the thing. It does lead into what I think is good news.
Okay, go
But
ahead.
what I've got to say, I think is important about what Mint did, because it really, you know, I've always been kind of on the side of, hey, it's their wheelhouse, especially with the snaps and all that stuff. But they did something that actually, it was their end, not my end. The long and short of it is I wound up hopping off of that because I had problems and I went to Ubuntu. And that's when I was looking for the videos and I found the video that you were trying to find the same thing with trying to get the, you know, the root user through Dolphin, because there are files I need to put in there for when we're running, you know, Steam and that kind of thing. There's like in the bash RC for NeoFetch and stuff like that, some minor stuff. But I was having trouble, and the way workaround was using Nemo. And I thought, okay, you got to have a second file manager. That kind of is not perfect, but it works. And then I found Crusader when Chris Titus talked about it, and I really like that. That's why I sent you the message. But the long and short of it is I am now, by Michael Tennell's suggestion, and Schickel was in that conversation. I did not make the show last week, but I did the after show, and they suggested Manjaro KDE. And I've been thinking about trying an Arch distro for a long time. And I got on here, but to get back to the Mint thing is what I found out ultimately is Mint decided to, through doing some search for this to try to find a repair, I come across the Cinnamon Spices website, and it's completely, we'll be back on every page you go to. They decided to do a server update, which is fine, but they didn't tell anybody. And that's where the Spices applets are housed. So me thinking that something was broke on my system caused me to nuke and pave Cinnamon again, which I'm sorry, but I think that was pretty low to not let somebody know you were doing that. Now, the kernel update, if there was a problem there, that's a whole different issue. But even on 20, it made me believe there was something wrong with the system. The good side of this is I am really enjoying Manjaro right now, KDE. I think it's fabulous. Kubuntu, I really did like it too, but coincidentally, I did find some, I think Schickel put it as connection issues. When I went to look at a video of yours on Telegram, I had installed something, and this is my ignorance, maybe for the Qt system or whatever, because Michael said that might have been it. I went to put in Calibre ebook editor, and when I would go to open the video, suddenly it would open up GIMP. So there were some buggy things that I was finding with Kubuntu itself, 2004. And finally, when Michael said that he thought Manjaro would be a good fit for me, I thought I'd give it a run. And 3 days into it, I toasted this system too, because I did take out the wrong files. But I'm not upset about that because I want to learn this. It is a different animal. And honestly, when I reinstalled it, it was very easy. It was very easy, and it's running very well. I just messed up something tonight on, like I said, I mentioned earlier before that we started on the Windows or super key, where it was nice. You tapped it and it worked. Now to map it again, it doesn't want to do it without a double key command. So I'll get through it and I'll figure it out. But that's the whole thing, is I want to learn this. And that's how you learn, is sometimes, as DT says, it's got to be a little painful. But this is a good thing, because sometimes, I hate to say this, sometimes you got to have a little bad to get you to the good again, and nothing against Mint. I still think it's a great distro. I just think some of the tactics now that are being done, I was being forgiving, especially with the snaps thing and what I thought, hey, let them do what they want. It's their distro. But that was not right, to turn around and do a server update and not send a message across of any sort, and then have us, have me think the system's broken, nuke it because of that, after being on it 21 months. It just, and coincidentally, I think 2 weeks before that, I literally just said, they fixed the suspend issue after how many versions, and it's been running great. And then this all happened. So it's like, I thought, did I jinx it or what did I do? So anyway, that was my adventure the last, week and a half or whatever. So.
Well, I think with Mint's, the splices being down, I don't know. Is it something that maybe they communicate in some way that we don't know about? Like, do they post that in the forum somewhere that the website's going down?
Telepathically.
Well, I don't know. I'm just saying, I don't know where their official channels are. So maybe they did post it and we missed it, or maybe they need to do a better job at posting it, or maybe they didn't do it at all. Eric, go ahead.
That's what I was going to ask, Joe. Did you see? I know you're pretty disgusted, but I would probably go look in the forum and just be like, "Am I the only one, that had this happen?" I mean, you'd have to think other people. I mean, they've got a pretty substantial user base. So
well, and the thing is I've got multiple versions of it. It's on my wife's computer. It's on the back HTPC. It's on the little workstation, and it was on 4 computers, and it was doing the same thing on all the computers. So I knew then, all these different systems, that it wasn't my particular system. But for me to have to, let's think about this as the average user. If somebody has something like that isn't going to be working, they're going to think it's their system right out of the gate too, before going to look on the forums. And I was searching on the forums for fixes for the applets or all that stuff to do. Maybe I need to reinstall the applet manager. So I took that out, reinstalled it, whatever. But I didn't come across one thread other than when I finally, in my search, happened to come across the Spices link for their website. I thought, I never thought to look there. Let me look there. And I looked there, and every single page said, "We'll be back." It's like, I thought, are they just redoing the website?
Yeah.
Or are they doing the server that houses the applets? And I thought, no, they got to be housing the applets, because it's not working on anything. They said it'll be back by the end of the week. This was Friday or Saturday. It still wasn't back. Monday, it was back. I checked it on the other machine, and it was back. So I know for sure now that it was them that did that.
Go ahead, Barb.
Okay, my thing is that, especially, I mean, this is kind of a fiasco in a way, if you think about it, because Mint seems to present themselves as, this is a great system for people to get into Linux who've not been, and they're not touting it as for, the power user or whatever. It's for average people to get into Linux. Mm-hmm. And imagine that you have, imagine, I don't know how adept your wife is with computers, but imagine here you go and you say, "I got a new system for you." And she gets in, it doesn't work. Yep. And I mean, that's going to sour a lot of people. And then when you said it wasn't posted anywhere that this was potentially a problem or that other people are having a problem, that really shows a level of either we don't care or
Mhm.
carelessness.
Exactly.
You know, I don't know. It depends on
I thought it was
um,
disrespectful to
exactly,
users.
exactly.
And my wife, she's not going to know to go put an applet in there or whatever.
Mhm.
I did. But the point is if there's something in the applets and my applets started getting wonky. So if it's something that's already loaded in there and you're going to use it, and she went to go use it, and my wife's been on a computer 18 years, but she's still, I hate to say this, she acts a lot like a newbie with a lot of things. And if she has a problem, she comes to me, here, fix this for me.
Mhm.
So the point is I consider myself a fairly experienced user in this now. I've been in it long enough. And it made me think that something was wrong with my system until I finally put 2 and 2 together. And I thought, well, let me check all the other systems. And if it did it there, then I know it wasn't me,
Mhm.
you know? So, and I just think that that's very unfair,
It is.
you know?
It's
And it upset me to the point where I was downright angry. But I'm kind of glad because I had been toying with the idea, do I really want to switch to ONI? I thought, you know, because there's a lot of good distros out there. And I've always had Arch
Yeah.
in the back of my mind, Arco,
Mhm.
Linux, whatever. But I do like KDE, and I think Ubuntu did a wonderful job. And yes, it's got a few little bugs. And I think 2004 releases in general have some bugginess. So I thought maybe it's time to do this. And I even wiped out the other SSD, and you're thinking I might throw regular Ubuntu 2004 back on there just to have it to play with it to kind of compare notes and things like that. So
All right, Sam. Well, first, Donald, welcome to Biddle. How are you, sir?
Actually, I'm good. Can you hear me?
I can.
Awesome.
Good to have you here.
Good to be here finally. I had a little problem with trying to get the sound coming in. The microphone was good, but
That's Zoom
know.
for you.
stuff happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you have something you want to talk about, but I first got to get to Sam here. So,
No problem.
Sam, you wanted to mention about Arch too as well, right?
Yeah, this week it's my goal to learn or get into Arch. So I first of all want to know which distro as such other than Manjaro I can use so that I can just get the nitty-gritty of Pac-Man and all the other small things, so that I've been using Pop OS for the last 1 week on my VirtualBox. I've just decided to nuke it and get an Arch system. So just I want to get an opinion on that. Which distro would I choose?
Any takers?
I can,
Yeah, I
I
think
can take that.
You know what I'm
Endeavor
going
out-
to say? It's a pretty big can of worms that we're opening there, but
Yeah.
that's okay.
I'll say.
I mean, I would say just I've been using Manjaro for a long time, and I mean, Manjaro is a pretty easy way to kind of get into an Arch-based system. Endeavor is another good
Yeah.
way. The difficult thing about Arch for new people is installing it. So any distro that's going to give you that leg up where you can just use their installer and have a usable desktop, from there you're going to, if you're setting about just to try to figure out Pac-Man and like how Arch is structured and following along with the wiki and stuff like that, any of them are going to get you there. It's how much stuff they do. So to contrast like Endeavor and Manjaro, Endeavor's does very little. It just basically installs it, and there's a couple tools that they include, like setting your mirrors, your update mirror and stuff like that. Manjaro does a lot of stuff. They're going to install a lot of applications for you. They're going to set a lot of your settings. They're going to change the desktop, defaults out of the box. Everything's going to look different. So depending on what you like, if you like something that does everything for you, then Manjaro is a good choice. If you like something that's very close to stock, then maybe something like Endeavor. But there's also like a dozen other things out there. So
I think the question here is to Sham would be, first of all, how do you want to install it? Do you want to go the easy route? Do you want to go more like text space in the terminal? I think those things are important.
No, I want to.
and
I want to learn even to install so that I can, if it is if I choose the Manjaro route, it will be like doing Ubuntu. It'll be much easier. Just click, click, click. I
What
just
about
want.
Yep.
I just want to go into the terminal. I like that. It feels a little walky, like a hacker sort of thing.
What about Arco? What's his face? Eric
Yeah,
Dubois?
yeah.
Yeah,
Arco's a
that
good
would
choice.
that would be a really good choice because he steps you through it. So from like he's got different levels. I've never used it, but other people here have, and I've looked at it. And he steps you through it. So you start out where you actually have a system that works, and then the next step, you do more of it yourself, and so on and so forth. Maybe that's what you want to look at. And he's got great documentation and videos. And
Well, Vince,
If you
would know.
really want to learn, Arco is a great way to do it because Eric does step you through a lot of the processes. And if you follow it all the way through, you'll get to the Arch way of doing it rather than just having the system installed for you. Eventually, you'll get there where you create the whole thing yourself. It's a long learning process, but if that's what your end goal is, that's a good way to do it.
But in fairness, I think if you're looking at, I'm sorry, I want to interject though, because of what I just went through here is I think, yes, in one breath, I didn't want to necessarily learn a whole new way of terminal right out of the gate from raw, with Arch.
Yeah.
And this was an easier install, but there's a lot more than just the guided through install. Esnick did a video on it, which was one that I looked at. And there was, even with talking about the EFI and then, without hibernation and things like that, I think there's things, it's not just that simple. You still should do some research before you do that. The other thing is because I picked KDE, there's a lot of features in here, right down to changing the way the menu launcher looks. There's different choices for that. There's features in here where you could they're not on by default, but you can go in and turn on AUR, flat packs, and snaps if you want them. If you don't want them, then you just use the repositories. So there's a lot of things that are not necessarily just automatically turned on in here. And then when Michael said to me, "Oh, it's sudo pamic," and then whatever the command is versus apt, that was what sold me on giving it a whirl. So there's still a lot more in here that can be done from an art standpoint. And I guess the other thing I would say is, if he's got the time to do it on his main machine, and that's what he's looking to do it on, fine. But to me, the route he's talking about going, I think if you've got a main machine that you want to run whatever you're comfortable on first, and then do that on a separate machine or something, that's one thing. I'm doing this on my main machine because I kind of didn't have a choice, and I'm fine with it. So
I'll agree with that. But like I think if you follow along through not all of Eric's videos, because you'd be 3 years watching them probably straight through, but I think if you follow along with the premise of that, you do get a lot of those things and learn it along the way. And even if you did it in a virtual machine, I think it's a good learning mechanism. It's a good way to learn it. And if that's your end goal, is to learn how the system works rather than just have a system to use, I think it's a good way to go.
But I would suggest that it not be on the main machine. I know you did it on the main machine, Joe, but I really would suggest it not to be there because, like I've said before, it's not just about being able to install Arch or put it on. It's about being able to maintain Arch. And, the idea is to, like Sam was saying in the pre-show, that, Sam, you said that you wanted to dispel the myth that, Arch breaks all the time. Well, I've said Arch breaks. And I won't say it just breaks all the time, because it doesn't break all the time. But when it breaks, you have to be ready to fix it, especially if it's on your main machine. So for a situation like me, I could run Arch and I could fix it, but I would have to be willing to spend that time when things do go wrong, and they eventually will, to fix it in between the things that I have to get done. And that's where I draw the line, where I don't really want to do that. So
and that's why I have a separate drive in here. And I mentioned about putting Ubuntu 2004 on there. So at least I have a fallback. Do you remember, Rocco, some time ago that happened to me where I had a kernel panic during one of the streams, and then I had Pop OS on the other side, and I came back on Pop OS that quick. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea.
No, I
No.
don't think so either. Or having a separate machine, or having some other option. Absolutely.
Steven, you wanted to get in.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, if you're thinking about looking for an Arch-based system, and you're thinking about Manjaro versus some of the other options like Arco, one of the things to consider is the fact that that Manjaro actually holds back packages longer than some of the other Arch-based distributions. I believe that Arco uses the Arch repositories directly, whereas Manjaro does some extra testing before they roll it out. So if you're looking for something that's maybe a little like on the cutting edge, in alignment with Arch, Arco would be good. But if you want something a little more stable, a little more tested, Manjaro might be a good option for somebody.
Yeah. Big Pet?
I would personally suggest either Arco or Manjaro. Those two are basically the best what you can get. With Arco, as mentioned, you can get from most basic with everything installed Arco B, or you can go with basically Arch installed through GUI with Arco D, or you can even build your own ISO with his scripts he makes, where you can define packages and make them. So it's a great learning opportunity with Arco, and well, Eric is a teacher, so he wanted to make something to teach people, and he does that really well.
Well, there's also another suggestion, and I think Robin mentioned it in chat, is that Endeavor has that new release out. So that's always something to check out. And looking at the release notes, there was a ton of work put into bug fixes and all kinds of little minor improvements that go a long way in it. So that would also be. Go ahead, Eric.
That's okay. And I'll just also say, in terms of community support, so Manjaro and Endeavor both have pretty large and active communities.
Yep.
Versus, and I'm not trying to be offensive, but Arch's community is a little more difficult. If you go to the forums and ask what they would consider a beginner question, you're probably not going to have a good experience. So that's helpful as well. I know there's lots of times running Manjaro that if I have an error, or if I'm trying to configure something, they have so many users that by now most people have come across that same issue or have the same hardware I do. And so I can just go to their forum and usually find an answer. So
yeah, their forum is very active. It's a rapid growth there all the time, it seems like.
Yep. All right. Well, so yeah, I'll be shot if I forget to mention that Endeavor OS also has an ARM release too now. So that came along with this new release. So I'm not, into the ARM stuff, I guess, so much. But I did want to mention that there was a big ARM release for them, a first for them. So congratulations on that. But I did want to bring up something that Brian, the lead developer of Endeavor OS, brought up during the week at Twitter. And during the week, there was a tweet that he sent out, and I don't have it right on me, but basically he was pretty frustrated with people saying things, and I don't know. He didn't give any information as far as specifics, but what he did say was it's very frustrating when people basically jump all over you, for lack of his exact words. And I just thought that was absolutely terrible, because look, these developers, they put their heart and soul into this stuff. They do it for free. They do it because they love it. They do it because they have a passion for it. And then people come along and just pretty much try to destroy everything they're doing. And I think that is absolutely terrible. And we need to, as a community, make sure that whenever we see that, we completely take an initiative to at least call those people out for doing that, because nobody should have to go through that, especially somebody who's on a team like Brian is, who is not just that he writes a script or he wrote a horse app. Okay, they're doing a distro. There is so much work involved in that. It's not even funny. I can't imagine the time that he puts into that, and it's terrible that he has to go through that. And I think we need to be supportive of him, of his team, and everybody else that's working behind the scenes in Linux. And we need to do a better job of that when we hear people giving these guys a hard time.
Rocco, I had this tweet come up in my feed. I actually have it right here in front of me. Though he says, "Sometimes I wonder, do FOSS users actually realize that the majority of the devs are doing this unpaid and just for the love of it? Why do we have to get to endure pure and utter rubbish from you? Like you, we are enthusiasts." And I think that last line is critical. They are just like all of the users who love and enjoy FOSS software. They are just like the people on the other end of the stick. They don't deserve to be treated worse just because they're responsible for the products they make. If anything, that really means that perhaps a little bit of respect and courtesy when engaging with them, and not expecting them to to bend to your demands and treat them poorly. It's about respect and appreciation. Without these people, we wouldn't have so many of the things we do.
But see, there's nothing wrong with constructive feedback, but a lot of times it goes way too far, and we need to appreciate these guys because, okay, so I don't use EndeavourOS, I use PopOS, but the work that those guys put in make the whole community better. So I benefit from it regardless if I use EndeavourOS or not, because of the flourishing community that comes from it. So, and you can't stop people from giving them a hard time. You can't stop that, but you can say something when you see it.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with both Rocco and Chickle. It's almost like because they get it, quote, some people get it, quote, for free, they figure, well, they can rail on it all they want because, hey, they're just giving it away. What's it worth? And that's wrong. And that's where some of that attitude comes from. And then there are some people who just are basically toxic. And fortunately, the Linux community in general has gotten better, but there's still some very, very toxic individuals. And they're the ones who would be, they find some little nit and you can say, well, I found this and is it possible to get it fixed? No, they just go on a tirade, and that's wrong.
Well, the internet's the internet, right? And I don't think Brian has any delusions that like he's going to get people to stop being
right,
ridiculous,
being ridiculous. Yeah.
Right. And I think his point is that it's not so much that the criticism exists; it's more about just the vitriol and I think, Rocco, you're right. If people were to just say, look, no one's making you use it. You don't like it, don't use it. And also, if you have an issue, then report the issue. That's how things get fixed. That's how all software gets fixed. You may pay for software from someone else, but trust me, they're testing it and they're having people give it's, so, and I know Brian, I helped him today with something. I helped with this website because I can. It's easy. It took me 5 minutes to fix something that would have probably taken him an hour to figure out. And, last time I fixed something a couple months ago, he created a login for me for the website. And I said, I'm done now. You can go ahead and get rid of the account. He's like, no, I'm just going to leave it there just in case. And sure enough,
do with it.
Yeah. So, well, no, he figured maybe. So it was just something dumb. Like the bullet points on his blog post weren't indented right. It just looked wrong. And it was like, it literally took me 5 minutes. So anyway, I'm just saying, like, he's just a guy. He's a guy, and he's just someone who really enjoys Linux. He, when Antergos had the issues that they had, like that was his way of, he was the community manager and part of that community. He wanted to see it move forward. So he took the initiative and did it. And I know for a fact, he's putting money out of his own pocket for the hosting, for all of the stuff they're doing for the, the website and the forums, and then all of the build stuff. And like, I mean, these are all just volunteers, like just guys and people who just enjoy it and want to see it continue. And that's it. There, that's one of the things about FOSS that's so great is like it's such a level thing. Like He doesn't know me. I don't know him. I mean, we didn't. He puts out a distro. I say, hey, this is really cool. Do you need any help with anything? I'm talking directly to the person who puts it out, right? Like that there's no barrier there. Then that's amazing to me. So if you took advantage of that and said, oh, this is terrible and you guys are awful, like that's going right to that person, right? That there's no filter there. And conversely, if you say, wow, this is great, or maybe I did have a problem and can report it to them, like that's, to me, like I can't think of many situations in life where I have that kind of direct, communication with someone for something that I use. Think of any product that you use. Can you do that? No, that's amazing.
Yep.
And
if-
FOSS or Linux development for me is like, community service. It's for free. You do it out of your will, out of your time, your money. And someone, if they're doing a community service for medical stuff, for rehab, or for any other cause, do we call them out and say you're doing bad? No, right? We applaud them, we call them out, and we say that you're doing great work. Then I really don't get it. Why, when we do Linux development out of our own time for not being paid just for the love of doing it, still people get called? I don't know why, as if it's our duty to give them a OS. We don't have to. It's just the same way doctors do the service. It's community work, simple. So that
Jinder, go
we-
ahead. Sorry.
I don't think that we're ever going to change human nature. I've been saying, I'm sorry, I've been saying this at work. Where were you when the paper was white? When the paper was white and we all got together and said, hey, this is what we're going to do. It's easy to throw stones at something when it's already finished. It always is. And then for some reason, some people always have a habit of doing it. And I've seen it through, through work and everywhere I go. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just trying to point out that people do that. I mean, where were you when the paper was white?
That's an interesting phrase. I'll have to remember that. Yeah.
Go ahead, Eric.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. I've never heard that. Where were you when the paper was white?
That's a good phrase. I like that one.
Yeah.
I haven't heard it either before. But it's true, and that was what I was saying before. You're always going to have the cranky people who are going to do nothing but nitpick and be nasty about it. And, all that does is make the people that they're directing that at be like, well, I'm not going to pay attention to him after a while. It doesn't do them any good. It really doesn't.
The
that's
other
very
thing,
true.
Go ahead, Donald.
The other thing is when we notice that that's happening, the best thing we can do for those developers is just heap the praise on them. Just let them know that we really appreciate what they're doing. Because so often people who are in any kind of service get nothing but negative feedback. And when you offer them sincere appreciation for what they're doing for you, man, it makes their day. It just absolutely makes up for everything bad that's going on, every bad comment. When you can give them sincere appreciation, says, man, I just so much appreciate what you're doing.
Yep.
It's like I always say, you can't make everybody happy. It doesn't matter what you're going to do. Like Jinder said, you can't change human nature. And the problem with human nature is that there's going to be those people that are positive, those people that are negative, and all they do is focus on the negative. And then like Donald was just saying, you just got to let people know that they're appreciated, and that don't let those people out there that are being negative, don't take that to heart. Don't bring it down. You're doing a great job, that type of thing. And just keep up the praise and keep up the good work. There's no way in the world you can make everybody happy.
Nope.
Well, the thing is, and they're usually, most of the people aren't negative. It's just those few really annoying squeaky wheels.
The loudest ones.
Yeah,
Yep.
the
ones that
loudest,
poke.
nastiest ones. Yeah, who and then they're the ones who make it miserable for everyone.
Yeah, I'm not trying to make this about me, but two things. One is, like you said about just, Donald, I will leave GitHub issues that are just, hey, thanks for the awesome program. Like I hadn't known about this before. I found it today. I've been using it, and it's really cool. And thanks for putting that out there. Nothing else. That's it. Just want you to know. And if there's a better way to do it, then I won't log an issue. But, you know, I think it's important for just, you know, think of the work you do, you know, and it may not be glamorous work or, you know, but if someone happens to notice and says, wow, you did a really good job, don't you feel good? You know, so why wouldn't we think these are just normal people who would feel the same way? And the other thing is those loud voices. Part of the reason I haven't been, you know, participating recently and making videos and doing other stuff is, one, I'm just not feeling great, and two, that started to really wear on me. I've been on Twitter in 2 months. I haven't been engaged in like social media and stuff because those loud voices, even, and I get where Brian's coming from, even if you know they're just trolls and they're just probably trying to elicit a response out of you, after a while, it just, you just can't block it anymore, you know, and you're just like, I gotta,
You're
I have
human,
to,
dude.
yeah.
It hurts sometimes.
Yeah.
Seriously.
So I've just said, I don't have the energy to deal with this. I just don't. So, yeah.
Yeah, life's too short. It really is to sit there and respond to every single one of these people. I mean, it's like with me, if I see something like that, if it's definitely not, you know, if it's just some, you know, negative Nancy type person or troll, I just delete it. You know,
Yeah.
you can almost tell after the first 3 words of the sentence.
You can't unread something though. That's the
No,
problem.
that's the problem.
Yeah. You
And
know,
that's
and
what
you,
hurts
that it just sticks in there and you just think, I'm better than that. I'm not going to pay attention. And just all of a sudden it,
Yeah.
you know.
Gotta let it roll off, brother. Gotta
That's
let it roll
hard.
off.
That's a hard thing to do.
It is.
It really is.
You know, folks, I've just gotten off of social media altogether because of all the negativity and the name calling and all of that. It's just not worth it. It brings you down. I mean, even Brian Lunduke has just gotten off of it for the same reasons. It's depressing. And I'd rather be around people who are positive and encouraging, like this group here. You know, I love coming out here every week because what I get is my dose of positivity. I've got people who care about one another, you know, and I really appreciate that. And in fact, it's the one reason why I've actually gained the courage to actually come up on Zoom here, because normally I don't do this.
Yep. Well, we're glad to have you, brother.
Here. We're nice.
All right, Thomas, go ahead.
So I just wanted to say that as one of those developers that sometimes has to deal with people railing on their product and saying mean things for whatever reason, those of you that do say good things about the code that the developers that are making it put out, we really do appreciate it. There was a YouTuber, and I'm not going to name names or anything like that. They published a review of Jogger OS recently, and the review overall was mostly neutral. And I was appreciative of the feedback I got because they were constructive. And that's what I appreciate, is the constructive criticism, because I know I'm not perfect. I know a lot of times I put out code that has bugs in it and I don't catch those bugs. It's the people that use my code in ways that I don't expect that catch that bug. And I greatly appreciate that because they're doing work that 20,000 of me would never be able to do.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate those of you that do contribute constructive criticism. And when you say stuff that, like, you appreciate the work that we developers do, we greatly appreciate that. I had a dude tell me that Jogger OS was the best distro he ever tried. And that brought this massive smile to my face. It made my day, like Donald was talking about. You cannot get enough of that. And it's stuff like that that motivates me to keep making code, because I want to get more of that. And I want to show those that say that my distro is garbage or that my distro is a meme, that they're wrong. It's not a meme. It's not garbage.
Well, and development, like you make a really good point. And I don't, you know, software development, it's so complicated to just kind of envision all of the different use cases and scenarios and things. And you know, you're very focused on a particular aspect of something, and you get that working, and you can't possibly think of everything. And that's what I was saying earlier about, even commercial software, all software has bugs. It's just inherent. And a bug could be, it just doesn't work. It's broken. But a bug could be, from a user's perspective, that it doesn't work in the way that they expect it to. And accounting for all of that is impossible. So like Thomas is saying, having people use it, that's sort of the contract, right? I'm putting this out there for free, right? Free in quotes. And anyone's welcome to use it. And if you happen to find a bug or something, then the contract that I have, if I was doing this, would be fine. Don't go out and say, and badmouth it and say it's garbage and it doesn't work. Give me feedback. Tell me that there's something wrong, that's not working. So anyway, Donnie, you had your hand up, sir.
Yeah. So bad words travel fast. That's just not with FOSS. I think with all local businesses, you see like bad reviews right away. People go online on Google and put in their bad review. Like Donald said, it's very important to say positive things. When I got my 5700 XT, Endeavor OS was the only distro that actually worked on. And I actually sent him an email and told him, thank you for the work you're doing.
That's perfect, Donnie.
Wow, Thomas, that's great.
And it's true. You need to let them know that they need to know what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm still running Endeavor OS just because it's the only distro at that time that worked on.
Yeah.
Yep. And it could be something like that. That's a really, from a user's perspective, if I try to use something and it doesn't work, it's broken. It may not be broken. It may be me. It may be my hardware. It may be something I'm doing, but that's how it works. So anyway, Big Pod, I think you're next, sir, if you're there.
Well, the whole problem with people having bad criticism of developers and stuff, it really is a industry-wide issue. It isn't just in open source. Even in proprietary software development, everybody will be kinda against the developers just because they're making the software, and because apparently the users who use the software know better than the people who make it. And I think it's the same in open source. If someone who is a user thinks most of the time thinks that he knows better than those who make the software, even though in many cases this might be true, but in some cases it's not. Problem also is that people tend to be bad on internet because everything is behind a keyboard. Nobody knows who you really are. Nobody knows what you are. If everything would be like that, even over internet, face to face, people wouldn't be so bad as they are in the comments, in the issues, and stuff like that.
Yep.
I totally agree with Big Pod, because I too was a developer for about 5 years. So even in companies, I've seen that people look down on developers because they think, how can you leave this bug? Are you not accounting for that? But no, we're also humans. We can miss certain things. There can be some 0 days. It's possible. But people, rather than coming up with constructive criticism, they are like, how can you miss it, sort of question. It's a little hurtful sometimes.
All right.
This is also quite spread in gaming industry. In development of games, those who play think they know better than those who make them, even though we should understand that they have a plan how to make the game. And this is really seen when people, like, for example, people who all the time I see people who play World of Warcraft. They're all basically really bad people because they think they know better, and it's same with everything else. They think they know better, and because they think they have power, they start to do it in a bad way.
This
right.
is a small. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
He said something that bugs me. It's a little bit. So the game thing. Think about this. Games used to ship on a cartridge. It had to be right. Games nowadays, they release them intentionally unfinished, so that because they know they can patch things, and there's just different mindset about it. It was just a little point to pick on, but you think about how the pressure you were under to build something that wasn't broken whenever it was shipped on a hard, written,
That's
So,
definitely true though, because there isn't a game out there that comes out today that works 100% right when it comes out. Most of them come out with beta access or early access or whatever it may be, and it's
I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about.
I know. It's just stuck in my.
About features, about the gameplay itself, not being how users like it, and because then they start railing against developers for not being exactly the way they like it.
Right. I still think games should be better.
Well, and we've got a couple
today.
people in the YouTube chat saying Dolphin and everybody else. Yeah, don't get me started on AAA gaming.
Yeah. So definitely should be more bug free than they are right now. But all right, we are going to tackle. I guess we're going to try to tackle or start to tackle our app list in the second hour. But Donald, there's something that you wanted to bring up.
Well, I've got a little theory that I've been kind of playing around with in my head. And you guys don't know me real well. I'm no developer and I'm no expert on things Linux or anything.
That doesn't matter, dude.
But I have a pretty good ability to spot patterns. So I think I may have an idea of where Ubuntu Linux is going. And I think Ubuntu Linux is going to end up being a replacement for Windows 10. And what I want to do is just kind of give you a rundown of the basic thinking I'm going through here. First of all, Microsoft has said repeatedly they want to get out of the OS business. They want to get into the subscription cloud business, something like what Office 365 is. There have been a number of articles out that have mentioned this before. Add to this the fact that the boards of directors of both Canonical and the Linux Foundation have multiple members, premium members, in fact, that are actually part of the closed source software community, including Microsoft. In fact, Brian Lunduke said that in order to become a premium member for the Linux Foundation, it costs them about $500,000 a year. That's not small change.
Yeah.
Canonical has implied, in fact, it was Martin Wimpress who said in an interview on YouTube that they are actively attempting to attract closed source corporations, the big corporations, to the Snap version of their software. And he shared that many of these large corporations are now producing and putting software into their Snap store. This is a huge step towards Ubuntu becoming an OS that the average user can actually use coming over from Windows. There are other things that also speak of this. There are some attitudes that are gaining popularity. One is that choice is bad. I've heard it said here. Choice is bad because it causes confusion.
Well, let me interject there for 1 minute, Donald. Choice isn't bad. It's the multiple choices that we have can confuse people. So I don't think we've ever said that choice is bad because
I'm not speaking of this group necessarily.
Okay.
It's what I read a lot of the comment section on YouTube with Chris Titus and others that I follow.
Right.
And I look at what people are saying there. All right. And we have actually balanced that out a bit. especially you, Rocco, you're really good at doing that kind of thing. Getting a more balanced perspective or keeping a more balanced perspective. I appreciate it, by the way. What I was trying to make was a statement that kind of reflects what a lot of people coming into our community are saying, and just the idea that is going out there. I think choice, as a general rule, is a pretty good thing. It can cause confusion, but it can also allow people to find that which they want. The average user from Windows, from my perspective, is not interested in modifying their system. They want a system that looks good to them and works.
Yep.
Is basically what they want. They want an appliance. And so the things that we as Linux users have fallen in love with modifying our desktops and coming up with new modifications or changing our systems around to specifically do what we want them to do, aren't the things they want. And these are the people that they're trying to attract, because the idea of making Linux the top desktop operating system in the world or in the country, the only way to do that is to attract these people and to meet that need. So there are more and more people in the Linux community who want Linux to become the predominant desktop OS in the US. This has both good and bad aspects to it. The good parts is it becomes something that is closer to Windows from the standpoint that the mainstream software that everybody wants is there, and developers are developing for it actively. The bad side is in order to cater to those people and the user demands, it may well lead to many of the same problems we see in Microsoft today. It's not going to happen now, but as time goes on. There's also an increasing number of people who are buying into the notion that choice is inherently bad, and they're pushing for 1 or 2 Linux distributions at most. As their numbers grow and consumer demand rises, they will bring this about. Because those of us who are Linux enthusiasts, our numbers are declining. They're not growing. Many of the people who are coming to Linux, they kind of sort of buy into some of what we do. But those of us who've been here for the last 20 years, we're in a very different situation than many of the people coming in. They're kind of a halfway in between. The argument is made that there is no way that all the Linux distributions are just going to go away. There's no way you can do that. Yet I would suggest there is. If there is overwhelming sentiment because of all the people coming in from that did not start with Linux, that we want just 2 distributions or 3. And because of the large numbers of mainstream development companies, software development companies on the Linux Foundation board, and the Linux Foundation pays for the development of the Linux kernel, they could at some time limit the availability of future Linux kernels. It's possible. Will that happen? I don't know. At any rate, my conclusion is especially after listening to Martin and all that I think they're moving towards using Ubuntu in the future, bringing Ubuntu up to the point where it can replace Microsoft Windows, and then just doing an end of life on Microsoft Windows. I think that's where they're heading.
All right, comments?
If I may.
Sure.
I'm one of those weird people who's only been here for the past 5 years, so I'm guilty of not valuing a lot of the things that some hardcore longtime Linux users do, especially in terms of like the freedom of like philosophy, in terms of freedom of philosophies of like freedoms and, you know, like FOSS stuff specifically. Because I know for me personally, it's always just been about the fact that I'm fascinated by the tech and how it works. But yeah, so I guess I'm not particularly concerned myself because even where I might see things going with like the decline of like traditional like old school Linux users, I, it's kind of just if things go that way. I mean, there's always people who will be different and will run against the grain. I mean, if Linux has been in the minority in terms of user base and in terms of computing style for years and years and years and years, it's probably not really going to change in terms of those types of users still being on the outskirts. We see more and more projects move to Linux or focus on Linux. We see companies developing stuff for Linux, but that doesn't stop the Linux users who are already interested from just doing their own thing. I think it's mostly just that we haven't provided a reason for there to be more hardcore traditional old school Linux users. Like there's just not an incentive for a lot of people to do that nowadays. And that's kind of probably the only way I would see it declining, is just that if that's what we want, I mean, there's got to be a reason to do it. Personally, I don't see it, but I'm also like a very consumerist kind of person. So I definitely, my values are a little different than probably a lot of people, but that's kind of my mindset about it.
Rocco, can I comment on this?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, my view on what Donald said is like, first of all, I don't think Windows is going to go away any time or go away ever, because there's one thing that the one organization that loves Windows the most is government organizations, especially security organizations, because if Linux or Ubuntu for that matter becomes prevalent and Windows 10 or whichever version is nuked, then how will they spy on it? First. Second thing, if Windows 10 goes away and Ubuntu becomes prevalent, then they will have to port all these applications like the 365 or all these Windows specific apps to virtually run on Linux, like Edge is now coming onto Ubuntu. So unless these two things work out, which I don't see happening any way, shape, or form soon. I know Proton is doing good in the gaming industry and all, but I don't think the government will anyway replace totally to Linux, because it'll have a big problem spying into people's computers. I'm sorry to say. I know these are harsh words, but that's how it is. Because Windows 10 practically has been termed as a spyware in a OS, or a OS in a spyware. So
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. Big Pod, go right ahead.
Well, first of all, let's go from the beginning. Well, I have been spending much of the time I spend around computers watching Microsoft and stuff around Microsoft, and I haven't yet seen any indication they really want to go out of OS space, because while Windows isn't their biggest thing anymore like it was years ago, now cloud editing, they still run backend of Azure is still Windows Server specifically made for Azure, and so they still need an OS to be maintained. Also, while yes, Canonical is trying to get as many of the proprietary software many people who aren't usually making software for Linux to use Snap, because they think that they can get the choice paralysis out of people, because that's the problem is choice paralysis, because you have 10 different package managers, which one to make? So they put in front of everything else they put in front of Snap, because it is the universal one. So that way they bring software closer to us. And I also don't think that Ubuntu or any Linux solution will soon replace Windows in any capacity. But to be really about people bringing, or Microsoft bringing software to Linux, it's about when they will move their runtime, their what is known as Win32 runtime to Linux. When they do that, all applications will magically work in Linux, because it's one of the big things that Win32 runtime and APIs surrounding it that are actually what Wine is emulating and Proton is emulating. And when that is moved, much of the software will work. But I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Yeah.
All right, Donnie, go ahead.
I mean, I do see a potential of Microsoft buying Ubuntu, but not for the OS reason. I think it's for the server reason.
Right.
Ubuntu is one of their top selections of Azure and their server infrastructure. So I do see that a possibility and a benefit for Microsoft, but to replace Windows 10, I don't think so. I think Windows 10 and Windows and server and their Windows server is still on the same infrastructure. And a lot of companies still use Windows server and they need Active Directory. And it's not easy to import that to Ubuntu or Ubuntu server. So
right.
I still think it is a big need. They still need to do the Windows 10, but I see the benefit of them buying Ubuntu.
Well, I think that there are some good points in this document, Donald, and I appreciate that. I don't know if I would see Microsoft. Okay, so Microsoft is getting more involved with open source. Okay, they're putting more developers in it. A lot of the developers want to get into it on the side, and you see a lot more involvement with them going in. You couple that with them working with Canonical, it could look like that's what's happening. That, Microsoft is going to do this or do that. But in the long run, to be honest with you, I think it would be so much involved in doing that it would cost them more money to do it to begin with. That's just my opinion. I don't think they would have a problem with buying Canonical. I don't think, to be honest with you, I don't think that's an overshot. I think that's a definite possibility. But to replace Windows with Ubuntu, I'm not sure I see everything that needs to happen for that to happen. Eric, what do you think? You're muted, I think.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say there's just so much entrenchment. I just heard the other day that the Social Security office still runs COBOL-based programming, which, the business is slow, and depending on the industry, it's even slower. I think that you see an adoption of open source in a lot of new development. And I think that's a great thing. And there's a lot of benefits to that. I mean, in my own career, at first, it was a lot like the Ballmer days where, open source, we don't know what that is. We can't trust it. It's evil. And by the time I was done at that company, the CEO was saying, we're getting rid of SQL Server and using, Postgres. Everything was going open source, and not just because of the cost savings, but because of, again, like I was saying, that direct communication where if you, and I guess one of the other parts that Donald brought up was the commercial side of this, right? The Linux Foundation, those big businesses that have a vested interest in open source and Linux, and they see it as a profit vehicle much more, than a, open source like maybe we see it. And so that there's a difference there. But in terms of, can they really attack open source and stop it or stifle it? I mean, I don't think they can. That's why I've never been afraid of all of this effort that Microsoft's putting behind adopting open source. And when you look at their profit today and where they're focusing. It's all on the hosting side in Azure and all of the open source projects that are in there. And I think that Linux is a tool, right? It's a technology that's available to businesses and to us as end users, and for the people that want to use it, it's there. But in terms of replacing Windows, especially in the enterprise space, and especially in the short term, I just don't see it. But again, the curve, the trend is more towards open source and new projects and new development. And so I do see that over time that there is much more of a use case, and just having supported desktops in an environment and in an enterprise environment, the tools that Microsoft provides, like Active Directory and things like that, make it so easy to do that. And you see Zorin maybe trying to get into that space where they're trying to make it so that you can, manage desktops and stuff like that at scale. So Linux just still has a long way to go in a lot of areas in practical terms for technology. So I think, like Rocco said, there's a lot of valid points here, and there's a lot of things that, hey, you want to be mindful of, but at the same time, I can't say that I can buy in wholeheartedly with some of it. So,
right. Vince.
Yeah, I think my input is sort of along what Eric and Big Pod was saying earlier. I see a bigger trend actually where and it's difficult saying this to a group of people who love desktop operating systems, but I think I see a desktop as being just less and less relevant these days, because I mean, you look at Windows, it's pretty much the desktops are pretty much becoming a vehicle for services that are just becoming online and cloud-based. So many businesses that I see are moving a lot of their even internal systems and services to more just having a thin sort of desktop system, a thin client, so to speak, and serving all their users from a server somewhere. And so, and you look at something like Windows, it almost seems like with the way that Microsoft's been dealing with it, it's becoming, and I don't have the numbers, but it's becoming less and less relevant for them as a moneymaker. Their money comes from the server side and Azure cloud services. So it's almost like it becomes a vehicle for them to sell more Azure cloud services. And in a way, gaming's the same as well. It's the desktop's just another vehicle to get onto Steam. And so you look at how well something like, I don't want to mention it now, but Chrome OS has taken off. See, Shickle? Yep.
Oh, yeah. You got my attention.
Yeah. And so as much as I sort of hate to say it to a bunch of people who love desktop OSs, it seems like it's just more becoming less relevant anyway.
Yep.
To touch on that as well, it really is a shift in priority, I think. Like, Microsoft really nailed the whole concept of marketing an OS. But I think that the OS mattering is kind of becoming just an out the door kind of thing. People are starting to realize, not only from a user perspective, but from a development perspective, that it's not really the OS that matters, but rather what you can do with it. And if it doesn't really matter like what the person's running, it just matters what services you can offer them. I think it's not only easier to make money that way, so it might perhaps even be more accessible as a whole. That also could be monopolized, but we'll just brush that aside for now. But it also means that users have to worry less, and I think that's going to be a huge selling point, is just not even having to feel like the OS is a concern, you know?
Right. That's exactly my point. So, I mean, 20, 30 years ago, you could open up Microsoft's books and you could say that Windows was their biggest selling product, but now it no longer is. And so the way that they've prioritized the OS has been, they've virtually made it free because they probably get some profit from the data that they get from their users, and B, it really just becomes a vehicle to their other services they sell.
Yep. Well, I don't know. Anybody else have any thoughts? Okay, we're going to move on.
No, I have one quick comment. You know, the thing about the desktop though, and I'm pleased to see this, is we are starting to see a little bit more advancement in the sense like Lenovo starting to have a line of of Linux machines. Yes, we see a couple with Dell, so they must see something in Linux to start coming out with these machines, which is something we've been hoping for. So as far as the desktop goes, I think, yeah, desktop has always been a platform to run your tools. And the cloud is getting more and more prevalent, but I still think until you get to a point where, designers and people that are doing major projects or, architects, whatever, don't need this anymore. They could do it in a different method. I think it's still going to be around for a while. There's got to be a reason why, as much, again, we've been praying for this, that proprietary companies are now starting to carry some Linux lines. And it would be nice to know. I wish they would say, hey, this is why we're thinking of doing it, but and we're moving forward with it. But I don't know if we'll ever know that, but it's a good thing. It's a good sign. So that's it.
Well, the last thing I would throw in is, I know we here are all enthusiasts and love Linux, and but most people, they don't care what they run as long as they can do what they want to do. So that's something to interject into that thought. That's the way most people that do things online today. And there's a ton of people out there that don't even have a desktop computer. They have an iPad or a phone that they use. They don't even want or desire a computer. So that's also part of the equation. All right, so we are going to wait. Does anybody else have anything they want to talk about before we go?
Yeah, I just want to make a quick comment.
Go ahead.
I wish one more thing from Canonical, if they could advertise Ubuntu a little more, I mean, at least a little, as a beginner friendly OS, because today when I was seeing a YouTube video for how to use Ubuntu, the presenter was saying that Ubuntu was literally used by security professionals. So this is the kind of introductory things that they give, because if you want to use and do your daily chores, just use Windows, or otherwise if you're getting into security works and all, then use Ubuntu. Rather than letting them explain to the newbies, I think like Windows advertised in the beginning, Canonical should at least invest about 2 to 3% in advertising it as a beginner friendly and daily OS to the regular public. That would be a bit good thing for the regular adoption. But I sadly don't find any advertisement from any OS community in that matter. If that we could do that, it will be a really good boost. That's what I think.
Well, we've talked about that before, Sam, and that's just like, where do you start? Who supplies the money for that to advertise? Who puts it all together? Like
Canonical and Ubuntu do actually advertise as well. There actually is an advertising budget. It's just usually not like TV ads, because those are not only insanely expensive, it'll probably just fly right beyond most people. Because you're not giving them a physical thing they can hold. You're advertising a service, which is a lot harder to do, unless it's like, I don't know, like TikTok or Tinder or something out. When it's a whole OS, advertising on that specific level without hardware to back it, even in-house or third-party hardware, it's just insanely pricey and likely not worth it. So most of their advertisements are done for the enterprise, the server side of things. You'll see advertisements on Facebook, on Twitter every now and then, but as for normal people, TV or media advertising, it's just far too expensive to justify right now.
I have seen sidebar advertisements on websites from Canonical or full screen advertisements.
But it's about their servers, though. I've never seen an advertisement for
Yeah.
their desktop OS.
Yep. All right, we are going to move on to our app list. So for the last couple weeks, months, maybe 2 months, I don't know. We've been going through top whatever app list for Ubuntu, and we decided we were going to kind of make our own app list up. I thought it would be a good idea anyway, and so Alex was here last week on Biddle Europe, and he was very kind enough to set up a Cody document for us, Cody MD, and we have a list of all the categories that we're going to go through, and we're going to break down the categories and talk about maybe I guess the suggestion is to take the top 3 of, say, a category and put them on our list as what we would choose to give to people, or what we would choose to say, if you want the best of Linux apps, here it is. So we are going to, if anybody has any suggestions through this, please feel free. But we're going to start with the browsers category, and that's a tough category. Okay, so I guess I'm not exactly, we're going to work through this because I'm not exactly sure how it's going to work out, because we have talked about some of this already. But I guess what I would want to hear from everybody is, if you had to rate your browsers 1, 2, 3 of what you would want to see at the top, what would you say to somebody to say, this is why you should use this browser because of this feature or because of this reason? So you can start raising your hands if you like.
I'm gonna actually kick this off by sacrificing my vote for Chrome and actually suggesting Firefox.
Why?
So despite the fact that I love and use Chrome a lot, I actually really admire the work that Mozilla's put in with Firefox, and I like that their goals in terms of not only internet privacy but also control for the users over how their data is used and seen online, as much as possible without making it, inaccessible, because security can be hard. I think that they offer a really, really stand-up, fast, competent browser, which has been around for like years and years and is still kicking, despite the hard times that I give it, and the maybe some difficulties that they might have been facing recently with some of the layoffs and issues over at Mozilla. I honestly think that it's a wonderful browser, and it's more than worthy of its seat on the round table of browsers. So
see, my concern,
I love
Chickle, is not that Firefox is a bad browser. My concern with Firefox is the direction that Mozilla is going in, which is not a very good direction in my opinion.
It's scary.
It's been slowly dropping over the years to the point now where it's pretty scary, and that you have to wonder about the future of Mozilla Firefox. So that would be my only reason of not putting it up there as, one of the best browser out there. Joe.
Coco, can I?
Hold on, Sam. Joe, go ahead.
I tend to favor Chromium because it's probably the closest to Chrome. And I do have Firefox on here as a secondary, but I agree with what you said about Firefox. One of the things that I've noticed is in some ways they're locking things down from a security or privacy standpoint so tight that, as an example, there's things that won't work on it. When I go to do an eBay process for, doing my labels or whatever, it doesn't like it. It won't do it. So there's things that have changed to where its functionality doesn't seem to be, to me, as intuitive. And I agree with you that I think in the privacy aspect and other things they're doing. So I'm not a favorite of it. I think for me, Chromium, which is the closest thing to Chrome. I know there's, Vivaldi and other ones that run those, but I think for the average user, for something that's going to be the closest that works to Chrome and have all the same features, and then also the syncing and all that, that tends to work best for me, in my opinion. And I think it would probably be for a good alternative for users to Chrome. Although a caveat is there is the occasional thing that won't run on Chrome too, but that's very few and far between anymore. So.
All right. Thanks, Joe. Big Pod.
Well, for browser, for me, it's currently Firefox because it's what I use and I can use it on all my systems. But I've been waiting for so long, and now soon-ish, I might get my wish and get the Microsoft's Edge on Linux, and then I'm probably gonna switch to that.
But Big Pod, not just that you use Firefox, but what is it that you would tell somebody the reason why that you use Firefox over something else?
Main reason is I don't like Google's browser. I had problems with it. Chrome has been problematic for me, and again, the problem is with being made by Google. Again, another problem why I don't want to use. So I chose Firefox for being cross-platform. That was a big reason for me. And now I've seen a lot of problems with it, so that's why I'm moving away from it. And because I use also a lot of Microsoft's OS, especially now at work, I kind of fell in love with Edge, and I'm just waiting for it to come to Linux, and then I'm gonna start using that.
Okay. No, fair. Donnie, go right ahead.
I use Firefox, and the main reason for it is the containerized tabs. I think it's one of the best features that no other browsers have.
Such a killer feature.
That's a
Donnie.
100% agree.
Yeah.
And if you have never tried them, you need to try them. I mean, even Chrome and Chromium switching, they have profile switching in the browser. Don't even come close to container tabs. They just don't.
I'm a little jealous.
Now, I can't say that I'm a Firefox, but I do miss the container tabs.
Yeah, I would say that's the killer feature for me is from a secure. And I've tried to explain this to my wife, who's just a normal user, and she looks at me like I'm insane. But if you have container tabs, you can set up like where something opens, and so all my social media, or all my work, or all my personal like shopping, whatever it is, entertainment, it all goes in that place. And the practical aspect of that is that it's essentially its own browser. From the standpoint of, you know, how apps will look across cookies, they'll look across, you know, tracking history and stuff like that. The container makes it so those apps or those websites only see each other, which is fine. I don't care if Netflix sees Prime Video or whatever, you know, I just don't want it to see my personal stuff. If you combine that with some things like cookie auto delete and history auto delete and some things like that, that kind of cleans up your browsing, it increases your browsing security exponentially. And honestly, there's a lot about Firefox that I don't like. Rocco, I'm glad you mentioned the direction you're going in. Some of the things I see them do, I scratch my head like, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's a
shame. You're
dude.
you're the only alternative, and you're making crazy decisions. Like anyway, so I would probably use Chromium and you know, Edge, something else, if I could. And it's just that's that thing, and I keep looking. Is it there? Is someone working on it? And apparently, just the architecture of the browser makes it so it's very difficult or impossible to replicate that sort of functionality. So,
yep.
Anyway,
it's absolutely killer. Thomas, convert us.
So I am yet another Firefox plebeian, with one exception. If you have a Google-based smart home, then I heavily suggest.
Who let Thomas in here anyway?
What?
Sorry, my Google Home was talking. If you have a Google-based smart home, like I do, you need a Chromium-based browser on your system. It doesn't have to be your main browser, but you need a Chromium-based browser because you can cast from your browser to a Nest Mini. You can cast from your browser to a Chromecast or something like that. And that is amazing functionality, especially if, say, you have an office and a living room and your laptop or your desktop does not move rooms. And what you can do then is you have friends over and you want to watch a movie. Cast a video from your desktop or laptop from that totally legitimate site that everyone should be using because it's free. If you get my head, yar har har. You can cast that to your TV in the living room, and you don't have to drag your 50-pound desktop or your 10-pound laptop into your living room and plug everything up and have cables everywhere. It's
You can
really
use
nice.
your phone though.
Yes, you can, but sometimes using it on your laptop or desktop is a little bit more convenient for whatever reason. Now, there is a little caveat that there is actually an open source extension that is under development on GitHub called FXCast, which is supposed to add that functionality to Firefox. I have used it. It's okay, but doing it in Chrome is just better and requires less steps to get it hooked up. So
your vote would be Chrome, is what you're saying.
If you have a Google-based smart home, every other time, Firefox.
Why Firefox, Thomas? Why?
Because it's open source. Shush. I'm sorry. It keeps hearing me and going off.
Well, how about you not say it then, Thomas? That's a good idea, huh?
Probably. The reason I typically suggest Firefox is because, like Chromium, it runs on basically everything. And like Chromium, if you have a tab on your phone, you can cast it or you can send it to your laptop, desktop, what have you. But it's all that while being open source and having less tracking in it than Chromium does. Because even though Chromium is open source, it still has some tracking in it from Google. Not as much as Google Chrome does, but it still does have a little bit. So
I don't know. I'd have to actually research that, though. Now, Chrome, I could agree with you, but I'd have to research how much tracking would be in Chromium compared to Firefox, because Firefox is not exactly the company or the browser that it used to be in that area. So I'd have to compare the two to say, hey, one has more than the other.
Mm-hmm. But for me, it's hands down the best thing that I use. At the very least, it's not made by a corporation as large as Google is. Because Mozilla, they may be on the downhill right now, but historically, they tend to be a little bit better about things than Google is.
They're not as big as Google. They just get paid by Google.
Right. This is true.
This is true.
Did I say that out loud, Dan?
Yeah,
maybe.
Not for much longer.
No, actually, they did. They got another
deal
chunk of change.
Oh, did they?
Yes.
Oh, I thought that was ending.
No, they got it.
No, they got another one.
Yep.
And keep us on our toes. Jason, you got your hand raised?
No, go ahead, Jason.
Yes,
You're
I do
muted.
have my hand raised, and that would be on the side of Chrome. I have been a user of Chrome, before I was into using Linux, and the only reason I never made the switch to anything else is because it works for me. With all my devices, my Macs, my Linux machines, my PCs, whatever the case may be. I mean, I've got 9 computers in this room, and they all run Chrome, and they all, they're all sync. So it's just, to me, it didn't make sense to switch over since I have everything already all set up across everything. I've had issues. I've tried Firefox, and EB and EB was talking in the YouTube chat about Firefox. I've had plenty of issues Firefox just trying to watch a YouTube video, and there'd be audio syncing issues or some other issue within Firefox. Turn it off, switch over to Chrome, works fine. So I don't know what is going on there with YouTube and Twitch and all those different things. For whatever reason, my systems never really worked as well as Chrome did in certain areas as far as streaming websites went. So I decided that I gave that a try. I gave the Chromium-based Edge a try. I've done I've tried Opera. I've tried all kinds of different browsers, and I've always just simply went back to Chrome because it's what I've always used, what I'm familiar with, and it just works.
Well, you're in luck, Jason, because we finally got GPU acceleration in Firefox after, I don't know,
10 years.
Yeah.
10.
Oh, trust me,
So
even with
we're
the
good
GPU
now, right?
acceleration, no, still issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I had some issues in that same arena, Jason. And yeah, Firefox can be a struggle. I get it. And I do web development, so everything is you have to build for Chrome, but I still do everything in Firefox, up to a certain point and before I start testing. And it's kind of why I'm hoping Edge is actually good. I know people, oh, it's Microsoft, whatever, but I'm hoping that they actually do a good job of implementing, the Chromium code, and we'll see. I don't know. All right, Vince, you were up next, sir.
Yeah, so I'm not quite sure how you're going to count my vote, because my vote is actually to have two browsers, Firefox and something else, maybe a Chromium-based one like Vivaldi. So
I've got like 8 installed, so
yeah, yeah, I have 5 normally, because there are certain aspects to some browsers that just work better for certain websites than others, and I think I wouldn't necessarily recommend for somebody Vivaldi. You've got to be, I think, a particular type of user to be using Vivaldi, one who likes a lot of options. But something like Firefox and Chromium or Chrome would work well for some people. Funnily enough, with Firefox, I tend to use that for a lot of YouTube, because for some reason for me, YouTube works better in Firefox. So go figure, even though it's a Google service. But the biggest thing for me with Firefox has got to be the containerized tabs as well. For somebody who has to manage a business Facebook site, whereas I don't want to use it personally myself, Facebook, it just works wonderfully. And also, one other thing that containerized tabs can do is allow you to have multiple email accounts with the same provider open at the same time.
Yep.
That works wonderfully too. But then again, it's almost like Chromium or Chrome has become almost default web standard as well. So if you want most of the sites to work, I think you need to go there. But I have a question. Do people sort of worry that with Chromium becoming such a dominant player, that web standards might go back to the old days, if everyone remembers, of Internet Explorer and Netscape Navigator, and that war, and how some sites just wouldn't work at all because they're built in certain plugins?
Yep.
Is that an issue? Should we still be trying to push Firefox because it sticks to the web standards?
Yeah, it's an alternative. And everything, if a world is based on Chromium, monocultures are bad in nature, they're bad in software, they're bad everywhere, right? Monocultures are just bad. There needs to be competition. And whether that's a small player like Firefox that's out there just toting the open source line and the web standards line, and even they break web standards. I mean, nobody follows them completely. Trust me, I speak from experience.
Eric, that's why it's so frustrating about the direction Firefox is going in, though, because we need them.
We do. And that's what I was alluding to earlier, is that if anything, the importance of them is that, and honestly, you have to wonder Google's motivations for funding them. And I honestly think antitrust is probably something that they look at and
Big
say,
thing.
If we were the only browser, that's probably not a good thing from the Department of, just so, so yeah, from that perspective, you may not use Firefox, just like we've talked about other open source stuff. You may not use it, but you should appreciate it and understand. So to Vince's point, when you think back, like the history of browsers, and we started with Netscape Navigator and then Internet Explorer and then Firefox, and Firefox was great for a long time, and then it got terrible. And then Chrome came in, and Chrome was amazing. And then Firefox Quantum came back, and that was good. And so you have these sort of, milestones. And the idea that today, like a browser 10, 15, 20 years ago was just a program you used. And you did a lot of stuff in your email client, or you did a lot of stuff in your office. Now we use our browser to do, I use my browser probably 95% of the time I use a computer now. And granted, of course, I'm doing a lot of web stuff, but I think that's true for a lot of people. And that's why browsers are so important, is we trust them with a lot of things, and so when you have that monoculture and everything's based on Chromium, then yeah, that's a bad situation. So it is important that they're out there. So, all right. Who do we have next? Let's go with Tony.
my vote would go for Chrome. I've used it a long time. It works well, and I need the built-in translation, which virtually no other browser seems to have. There is one in Firefox now, again, but it doesn't work as well. Before I had the translation, I always used Firefox, but I just think Chrome has got the edge, no pun intended. But I also would like to try Edge for Linux when it comes out, just to see, what they've done with it. And it's based on Chrome, whether they'll put a translator in that or not. So that's about all I've got to say, really.
I believe it is inside, at least in the Windows version.
Well, that'd be interesting. It'll give me an alternative, which is something I really don't have.
All right, Donald.
Well, I'm actually using two. Firefox is my main browser, and then I've got Brave as a backup. Firefox lately has gotten on again, off again. I've had sound issues. The sound issue will continue until they do a minor update, then it disappears, then it comes back. And as others have said, most of what I do on my computers is in a browser. I need the browser. I need it to work. I need it to be functional. Regarding security and all that, I'm not so sure how secure any browser is anymore.
Right.
It seems to be a toss up at how do you determine that as a user. It's difficult, So I've kind of just taken security and says, they know all about me anyways. There's not a whole lot I can do about that at this point. So right now I'm using Firefox. It's widely available on virtually any Linux or BSD distribution. And then on Linux, it's Brave as a backup.
Okay.
So for me, I was a avid Firefox user for containerized tabs, I think since the last 8 years. But since the last 6 months, I've started using Brave, and I just love it. It almost gives the same functionality as Chrome without the other shenanigans of copying your data and all that stuff. And it's pretty fast because it has it stops the ads and trackers and everything, so it's sort of a little bit more faster, and you don't get those annoying ads and videos popping up automatically when you visit a site, and something like if you go on CNN. So I just really love it more than any other. Right now I don't use Firefox because after switching on to Brave, I just don't feel like going on to any other browser, like not even Chromium or Chrome or what have you.
Right. All right, Joshua, welcome to Biddle. How are you, sir?
Doing great. Thank you for letting me on. It's great to see you guys. I personally use Brave, mainly because of security issues, and it just seems to work better.
Yep.
I used to use Chrome, but there was a recent update or something that caused little funky artifacts on the screen on certain websites. I don't know if it's a Chrome issue or if it's a NVIDIA issue. Both.
Yeah, that's really hard to pin down sometimes, especially with the browsers, of whether or not it's something to do with the video drivers or not.
So Joshua, I was all in on Brave for a little while when it first came out, and I was really interested in it and their whole, like, the way they were handling monetization and stuff. Well, we've sort of asked this of other people. What is it about Brave that you appreciate and that makes you want to use it?
I didn't have to install an ad blocker.
Okay.
This is true.
That's yeah.
And everything seems to work fine with it.
Yep.
Okay. That's a good answer.
All right, Eris.
I'll just briefly mention what was said earlier, that I think if you believe if the web should be open, should follow standards, anybody should be able to make a browser and it should work. It shouldn't just be the Chrome engine. I think you should use Firefox just so that that stays open and when we won't be back to Internet Explorer times. But the main reason I think I use Firefox is because of user.js. I can get rid of everything that I don't want. I can get rid of Pocket, get rid of those sites, get rid of the URL bar. You know how it turns gray, except for the main thing. I'm gonna make it all black.
Right.
So many settings. You can just drop one file and you're done.
That is such a great feature of Firefox. I think it's a shame that you have to modify it to get rid of things like Pocket, because I don't think it should be there to begin with, but it's awesome that that is there. Although I will say, like, about config settings in there have, like, over the years really, really dwindled as far as what they allow you to do today compared to what they allowed you to do 5 years ago.
In the UI, yeah, you have to
Yeah.
go into about config a lot.
Right.
Yeah. This is a dumb question that I should probably know the answer to, but you see so many derivatives of Chromium, right? So many offshoots, and well, are there any Firefox-based alternatives that you guys are aware of? I know there's that use the engine, but I mean, I don't
Well,
know.
what do you mean by alternatives? You're talking about
Well,
like
so you look. I mean, Edge is based on Chromium, and
Right.
Brave is based on Chromium, and Vivaldi is based on Chromium, and like you've got all these different competing browsers that are based on the Chromium code set. Can anyone think of a?
I have two on the list, and one is Pale Moon. And even though that's, I don't know, I think it's old enough to where it's not quite based on Firefox now anymore, but it was based on
It's a bit
Firefox.
stale, yeah.
Yeah. And
It
then there's-
wasn't. They broke off before the big change
Yes.
with
Quantum.
Yeah, sorry,
Yep.
Quantum. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And there's also WaterFox, which follows pretty semi-close to the latest versions of Firefox. And I actually have them on the list so that we can talk about them and get your feedback on them. But I guess we need to finish what everybody's
I'm sorry.
voting for.
It's
It's all
was just
good.
Jack handed random thoughts for you.
It's all good.
Well, those are good questions. Nobody brought any of those up, right? So, I mean, we've brought up alternatives to Chrome or Chromium or whatever, but yeah,
We
nobody's
definitely
bringing
want to. I definitely want to talk about them. I just want to get everybody's opinion first.
All right, Barb, go right ahead.
I'm a Firefox user, and I've been a Firefox user for ages and ages. I use it, it's cross-platform, and that's one of my things is things have to be cross-platform. Chrome is, but I don't like, one, I prefer Firefox because it's open source. Two, I think, there's the whole issue with Chrome tracking every single thing that you do. I also wonder about the Chromium Edge thing. How much telemetry is Microsoft going to put in?
Well, they're going to put some in, Barb. That's just what they do.
Oh, yeah. And I know that. And that would be enough for me to say, nope, just like I switched to VS Codium, because they took out all that as just, as a text editor, they've taken it out of, all the telemetry. But I like Firefox. I like the containerized tabs.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second, Barb?
Yeah.
I forgot to say in the beginning of the show that for everybody's knowledge, today is Barb's birthday. So happy birthday, Barb.
Thank you. It's also top like a pirate
Happy
day.
birthday, Barb.
Happy
birthday, Barb.
Happy birthday, Barb.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
All right. Sorry. Go ahead, Barb.
Okay, that's okay. I use Firefox on both my Mac and Linux and even my iPhone. There's only one thing that I have to use Chrome for. When I want to stream off my computer, in fact, it even happens with my Mac too, Sling. If I'm not in a room where I have my TV and I want to watch something while I'm doing some work, I have to use Chrome, because Sling refuses to have any other browser. It won't even let you use Safari on on Mac OS. Now that's like really dumb. So that's the only time I actually use Chrome.
So
I have no.
Your vote would be for Firefox, though.
My vote would be for Firefox. I don't have any problem with YouTube or anything else, but then I probably don't do a lot of all the weird stuff a lot of other people do.
We do some weird stuff. Just saying.
Yeah. No.
All right.
So, yeah, my vote would be for Chrome. I mean, no, Firefox.
Anybody else want to get in on their vote of what they would choose as the top browser, top two browsers, whatever?
So I just, I mean, I know I put my vote in for Firefox. Don't think Chrome is cool. It is. But on the concerns about like a monoculture, about like browser diversity, I think that's kind of one of the good things. The difference that we have here with Chromium is that there's a lot of other people involved in the process. In the fact that like it's not just Google, like it's Microsoft, it's Brave, it's all of these projects, Vivaldi, Opera. They can actually change the way that Chromium works. They can help control the standards of Chromium and how that works. So it's not really any more of a monoculture than web standards would be a monoculture by abiding by one specific guideline, because a whole bunch of people are involved in making that process what it is. So that's why it doesn't concern me at all.
Well, I think you touched on something there. I think adding Microsoft into the mix does change that, right? So now you've got two major companies that are behind it. I'll disagree in a way, though. Yeah, there's a lot of players that can make the change, but just because the change has been proposed doesn't mean that it gets merged in, if that makes sense. So
that's true.
Yeah, it's still kind of controlled, I guess, from Google, if you will. But I think you're right. Adding Microsoft in there has another big player, and I think that's a good thing.
All right, so we have our people that wanted to put in their vote for it, and so now is the time, Eric, to talk about Pale Moon or WooderFox or Firefox alternatives. I will gladly let anybody talk about Pale. Let's start with Pale Moon. Okay, so Pale Moon was based on Firefox. It is now pretty much its own code because it's so much different today than it was when it started. And it still works with, say, Firefox add-ons, but most of them are too new that they don't work with Pale Moon. So there are only certain add-ons that will actually work because of its old code base. So does anybody else have any experience with Pale Moon? Shickle?
There's a lot of crickets in the room.
I tried using Pale Moon, and what I found is that it was sporadic in what websites it would actually render properly.
Yep.
And same thing with WaterFox. I had similar problems with that. And I really need total functionality, otherwise there's no point in me using it. I like the look and feel of both, but like I said, I would just run into situations where it just failed to do the job.
Now, Donald, did WooderFox perform better in that area than Pale Moon? Because I always found that WooderFox was a little bit better, but you still had the same issues.
I had the same issues, and I couldn't tell you which was better or worse in that regard. Usually, if I start running into those kinds of issues, I uninstall and go to something else because I just don't spend the time to play with it.
All right, Shickle, go ahead.
I had a similar experience, so I'm glad I'm not alone in that, because then I'd be going crazy. But some things would be a little strange in how they loaded. It almost felt like just certain parts of the browser itself were being kept up while other parts weren't, almost as if like there's not enough people really like looking into it, and that might very well be the case. I would get like issues loading websites where certain elements would be marked as like insecure, like it wouldn't just load. But if I loaded it in any other browser, it's like, yeah, no, I can do that just fine. This is not a problem. And I have no idea if that's just because the actual the browser itself is just a few steps behind, and
more than a
some
few steps.
websites, yeah,
well,
some websites will just tell you, they'll just outright be like, yeah, no, like you can't do this. You're not supposed to be here. Go back. So, yeah.
Eris, go ahead.
I was going to say, going back to things not being based on Firefox, there used to be an embedded Firefox. I don't know if you remember. There was this app called Miro, and it was a podcasting app.
Yes,
and that
I do remember that.
Yeah, that went away because Firefox stopped supporting that, unfortunately. And I think that's unfortunate. They should have really focused on that instead of making things or like buying Pocket. That would have been something they should have focused on instead.
Well, but okay, and I hate to, like really blast Firefox, but that's why I said to Eric, it's so frustrating because of the people that, like you're talking about, Eris, about Miro, and the people in this room, the people like us are the people that made Firefox what it is because we supported it all of those years, because it was the place to go if you didn't want to be on the main browsers. You had an open source alternative, and it was great for many years. And people like us have supported it, and it's almost like they've forgotten that, and they're now focusing on what can make them the most money. And I think that's very, very bad as a direction for them to go in, and for us.
I don't know if I missed the days of whatever that was, but is that kind of like how now like a lot of like stuff is based on Chromium, where like Discord can just be like, it's basically just a browser essentially. Is that like the same concept, or is that a totally different way of doing things?
Well,
Because
I
I wasn't
guess-
sure if Firefox had that kind of like runtime ability.
Well, Miro was basically the same scenario of that, but that was an available thing. But I'm more talking about the fact that they were, what you looked up to as an open source company,
Right?
And they were pushing forward with privacy and security, and now they're not pushing privacy they say sometimes that they are, but it's in what they're doing, it doesn't seem like they are.
Now Google is Superman and we're all Lois Lane.
I think Solvency has taken over a lot of the goals of the project, unfortunately. When you have the majority of the money coming from Google as your search engine, you can't really go on a path towards total privacy, unfortunately. And that's what they try to go around with all the different services that they offer with VPN and the file sending and all these things, but none of it has panned out so far.
But Eris, what I don't understand is I don't see them ever becoming this huge company like Google or Chrome, like Chrome made by Google. So they do have a substantial amount of money that they were receiving from Google itself and from, supporters and whatnot. And it just doesn't see, I don't know, on the outside looking in, it doesn't seem like they have used that the right way. Like, it seems like they consistently need more, but they're not actually doing more with the browser. I don't know. It's just weird.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and maybe they're doing too much, right? And maybe it would be more about focusing on core competency.
They also developed the ROS software language, and that probably took a lot of work, and that probably diverted resources. Now, whether that obviously they're not going to do Firefox in that, I think they altered that, but that was the goal of Rust.
Donald?
The other thing is you need to look at management. As corporations age, there are changes in management. New people come in. They decide they're not going to follow the policies that used to be. I've seen it in trucking. I used to work for Crete years ago, and it was a great company. And someone else took over from the original owner, and within 2 years, it completely changed. And I look at management in Mozilla to see what has changed there in terms of how they're looking at things.
All right. So right now, as it stands, and forgive me because I haven't been. Let's see, Dan, cover for me for 5 minutes. Fill in some dead air while I look at this chat.
Oh, he's gonna start singing.
No, well, I don't know. Happy birthday, but Barb's not here anymore. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, the other
She said that she got dropped off from Zoom.
Oh.
Okay, so it looks like we got three more Firefox and 1 Chrome. So that would bring us to 11 for Firefox, 4 for Chrome, and 3 for Brave. That's our. So basically, if we were going to put the browser category in our app list right now, Firefox, Chrome, Brave.
Interesting.
Are we calling Chromium Chrome as well? We're using that interchangeably.
No, we'll get a separate one for
There
Chromium.
there were 3 people
Okay.
that specifically said Chrome. So if you guys, like Jason, do it. Like, we need some more input.
So people using Chrome on Linux specifically, is there something I'm missing by using Chromium? Because I've used both, and I don't see a major difference in terms of functionality. I mean, is there something that's not supported in Chromium that you would either want to or choose to use Chrome? I mean, all the sync features are there, all the add-ons work.
Thomas is like jumping up and down right now, Eric.
He's gonna jump.
I'm waiting for you to finish. I'm waiting for you to finish.
No, go ahead, please. I'm genuinely curious.
There used to be. I don't know if it's still there anymore, but at least up until recently, Google Chrome had a built-in Flash player, so you didn't have to go and install the Adobe Flash Player plugin.
Right.
But I don't know if
whatever that was.
No, it's like the
Widevine,
actual, like the actual
Like the
Adobe Flash
Pepper
plugin.
Flash.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember that because you had to install it to get support in other apps, so you had to have Chrome installed. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
But because Adobe Flash is now dead, I don't know if that's still included in Google Chrome. I wouldn't include it personally if I was the developer who made that decision, because that's not a good security idea. But at the same time,
She agrees with you, just so you
Good
know.
Lord. How do you stand that? I mean, come on.
It doesn't normally do that.
Okay, so
Only when you talk to her.
All right, so
Be quiet.
Colin, so we're running out of time, so we're like taking this up to the edge. Joe, Colin, are you going to be here next week so we can continue this? Hopefully.
I'm always here, Rocco.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so.
All right. Because we're just not going to be able to continue the conversation because there's more to talk about. So,
that's cool.
And there's more people that maybe next week would give them time to put their input in. So I did get a few people, but if anybody out there wants to put their input in, I don't care how you get a hold of me, Telegram, forums, discourse, whatever.
Start a forum post.
Yeah. Do it. I can't, but do it.
For people that don't have this list of Cody, maybe we should just add it as a post.
Yeah. Yes, you're right. You're right. We should. So, yeah. But we are out of time, so everybody gets the last word. Dan Simmons.
Hey, thanks as always, Rocco. It's been great. Good discussion here. Check out Linux User Space that drops on Monday.
6
Coming
a.m.
Monday. 6 a.m. Great discussion. That's all I'm going to say. You got to listen to it.
It was great. There's a guest on there too, so that was awesome. Eris, last word.
Thank you very much for the stream, and looking forward to December 31st, which will be the last day for Adobe Flash.
No more Flash.
Joe.
Thanks again for having me, as always. Yes, I was very excited to talk to you guys last week, and I'm sorry if it started out on a negative connotation, but I thought it was important facts that needed to be brought to attention. But I'd like to think that it was a positive landing or turnout for where I wound up with. I'm very excited about where we're going. And yeah, I mean, I had concerns about the Arch thing, like everybody says, but the reality of it is the whole thing started from a kernel drop that turned around and gave me a no boot in Ubuntu side. So I mean, it happens on both ends. But I really enjoy this, and I wish sometimes we had more time. And I know last week you talked about the earlier slot. If you've noticed, I never missed a show before. And when we went to the earlier slots with grandkids and everything, it makes it a little harder. So I still try to at least watch in. And I just feel so ingrained in this community and part of this show and this family. But anyway, I'm glad to be here every single time I can be here. And I appreciate the conversation. And by the way, Rocco, if you can fit it in, I would really like to talk about that file manager, that Crusader file manager, because it is something totally different.
Please
Whenever
remind
you
me
can
then.
fit it in. What's that?
Please remind me next week, dude. We'll fit it in.
I will, because it's a very, very interesting file manager, and it's as powerful a manager that I've ever seen. And Chris was not understating it when he did that. So that's it. Thank you for the long-winded
Tony.
Last word.
Last word.
Thanks for a great show, Rocco, as always. Interesting conversation. Take care, everyone. Till next week, and I hope to see you all then.
Sam, last word. Sam, you're muted, I think.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to skip Sam for now. We'll maybe get back to him. Big Pod, go ahead.
Thanks for having us this week, and we'll see you next week.
Eric? Oh, I'm sorry, Eric. My bad. Getting out of line. Colin? Flipping down boxes.
Yes, thanks, Rock and Co, for the discussions tonight. It was very interesting. Didn't have much input. Don't know too much about all the stuff you talk about, to be honest, but it's interesting to listen to.
I don't either, Colin.
Yeah. So, yeah, some of it's over my head, but it's good to listen and learn. So, thanks for the stream, and see you all next week. Take care.
Chickle.
Hi there. How's it going? Yeah. Hi. I liked being here. Thank you guys. I don't know what's wrong with me right now. I'm just gonna say on the next weekend. Yeah. Cool.
Okay. Jinda, last word.
Getting silly.
I don't think I can top.
No, I don't think you
Chickles.
can.
I
I don't
really
think you
don't.
can.
So, everybody, I'll see you all next week. Thank you so much.
All right, time traveler Vince, go ahead.
Man, does this show go by fast or what? Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rocco. Thank you, team. See you guys next week.
Thomas.
Well, I apologize for Google deciding that I wanted to interject so often.
Stop saying
that was your fault, Thomas.
Well, I finally turned off its mic. I need to add that to my list of things that I do before I hop on Biddle from now on. Mute the Nest Hub. So, but thanks for having Biddle again this week. It was a lot of fun. And yeah, I'm dead right now.
Eric, last word.
I just stumbled in the wrong door. I don't know where I am.
Right.
Anyway, it's great to be back. I'm glad to see everybody. This is just so much fun, and I've missed it. So you might see me around a little more. Thanks, Rocco.
Jason.
All right. I just want to say thank you for everybody that puts this show on. You know, Rocco, Dan, and everybody else that helps out. It's just great to get together and just have good conversations about technology and be able to, you know, just have a positive outlook on different things and have a forum for it.
Donald, last word.
Thanks for having me. I had fun. A couple of things I agree. Crusader's incredible. We really need to have a talk about that. And Colin, I don't understand everything either, so you're not alone, big guy. I just wish everybody a great evening and a great week, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for being here, man. Donnie, last word.
Thank you for having me. Great show. Looking forward for next week.
Bill, the man of many words. Even more many words. Okay, I guess we'll pass up Bill. Joshua, last word, sir.
Well, thank you very much for putting on the show, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm sorry about leaving you in the waiting room, but we don't usually we try to vet who comes in, you know. We were having a miscommunication, I guess.
In the age of Zoom bombing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, great day.
Yep. Sam, are you there? Sam. All right. Sam and Bill are not there. I do want to thank you, Eric, for being here because it was really good to have you back, brother. And Dan and Schickel, I really appreciate your help because I couldn't do it without you. We are going to come back next week and we are going to talk about more browser stuff, categories, and we will continue our app list. I think it's going to be a long discussion about this whole app list, and I love that. So we'll have something to look forward to. As Dan said, check out Linux User Space tomorrow. Definitely got to check that out. It was a great show, and I'm not saying that because I'm on it. I'm saying that because it was a great show.
Yeah, it was.
Yep. All right, we will see you next week. But until then, long live Linux.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.